This Greek oil tanker, the Kirki, is an 800-foot-long floating time bomb. In rough seas, 50 miles off Australia's west coast, the entire bow section of the mammoth ship has suddenly broken off and sunk to the ocean floor. Amid intermittent fires, thousands of tons of Arabian light crude oil gush into the Indian Ocean, threatening wildlife and the Australian coastline. When the pumps that feed water to the fire hoses fail, the captain frantically sends out distress signals, then orders his 36-member crew to abandon ship. But when they try to lower lifeboats into the water, they discover that the lifeboat hoists are also not working. The anxious crew can only stand by helplessly and watch the disaster unfold. A Perth TV station dispatches helicopter pilot Tim Boas and cameraman Wayne Curiata.
Slow down.
They are the first to arrive at the crippled tanker.
And as we flew around, we saw most of the crew on the back end of the ship, waving, thinking that we were a rescue helicopter. And then as we came around the front, we noticed the whole front end had gone, and it was just spewing out tons of oil. It was a floating disaster.
It was obviously a very serious situation. There were big seas, strong winds.
Wayne is shooting a close-up of the escaping oil when, without warning...
Oh, just take pictures, okay. Back. It's okay.
You got a chopper behind
Just shoot.
And that's what I actually said to Tim. I said, mate, this thing's going to go up.
As soon as it happened, we realised it was dangerous. But it was no use doing something silly and moving rapidly.
But what if the whole ship just explodes? I mean, it's lost the front end of it. There's gas and oil and flames. That's a deadly cocktail, that lot.
For 5 terrifying hours, the petrified crew worries that the Kirki will explode. Finally, rescue helicopters arrive. One by one, the 37 crew members are plucked from the rolling tanker and airlifted to another ship.
Slowly. Hold up.
The abandoned Kirki now drifts steadily towards the Australian coastline. It trails a menacing oil slick 36 miles long by 6 miles wide. There are still 60,000 tons of oil on board. Now comes one of the most dangerous jobs on the high seas. Amid surging waves, a specialized team is lowered by helicopter onto the potentially explosive Kirki. They'll try to defuse the disaster before it becomes an ecological nightmare. Trevor Kosh and his team from Sydney's United Salvage specialize in mid-ocean operations, but this would be their most perilous challenge.
There's no doubt that there were dangers involved with the job. The vessel was in great danger of breaking up and sinking.
To stop the fires, Kosh's men risk being engulfed in flames. They hang over the edge of the sheared-off foresection to disconnect electrical connections that have been igniting the oil. But even as they race to defuse the hot wires, the team faces another problem, one that could create a disaster of epic proportions. Abandoned, leaking oil, and potentially explosive, this Greek tanker, the Kirki, is the focus of nationwide attention as it drifts to within 8 miles of the Australian coastline.
Late this afternoon, the oil was closing fast on island reserves off Jurien Bay. Conservation authorities unable to relieve the gloom spreading over local fishermen.
In a dangerous operation, a salvage tug battles heaving seas to pull alongside the volatile tanker. They attach a tow line and begin towing her back out to sea. Their route is marked with a murky trail. Trevor Kosh and his salvage crew are appalled when they inspect the ship to discover what went wrong.
Once you had a close look at it, it was all painted up, but it was paint over the top of rust and holes and things that were patched up.
In fact, Kosh finds the Kirki totally unseaworthy. Parts of the deck that literally rusted to the thickness of a razor blade were covered with canvas and fresh paint. It is this corrosion that caused the ship's bow to snap off in the rough seas. The Kirki's ragged condition and explosive potential make Kosh anxious to transfer the oil to another ship and get off as quickly as possible. The Australian government insists that she first be towed 1,200 miles north, away from fishing grounds and population centers. But nature works against them. As storm swells rise, the foresection of the ship begins to sink.
At one stage we had lost buoyancy. The bow was 10 feet underwater. There was every chance that the vessel could break in half, and we would have had very little chance of getting off had it broken in halves.
The salvage team transfers much of the oil to the rear tanks and is finally able to stabilize the sinking vessel. An empty tanker is brought alongside and tied to the Kirki as the remaining oil is transferred. Only now can the salvage team breathe a sigh of relief.
There's no doubt that this accident could have been prevented. A vessel which has deteriorated should be scrapped, and that was not the case with this particular vessel.
The Kirki is towed to Singapore and sold for scrap. Winds push the oil spill out to sea, where much of it evaporates. Luckily, there were no injuries or loss of life aboard the Kirki. Both the oil company and the shipping company must pay the $30 million for the salvage and cleanup. But it is the ship's owners who are most responsible, for by their greed and neglect, they not only risk the lives of the Kirki's crew and those who saved them, but the health of the world's oceans. Oceans spared an environmental catastrophe by the intrepid actions of Trevor Koch and his men who fight disaster on the high seas.